The last thing I want to touch on is something that's really passionate for me. I spent 12 years in Los Angeles as a film consultant doing medical accuracy, and I learned a tremendous amount of things about the power of movies while I worked out there. So when I started doing tobacco prevention about 5 years ago, I started to look at the impact of movies on young people. And the very first thing I looked at was Disney, because I owned a tremendous amount of Disney DVDs. Old ones, new ones, things that were made in the 1940s, things that were made in the 1990s. And I started to explore the impact that this might be having on children. So I'm going to ask you the following question. Think about this because it's really important. Which of the following Disney characters did not smoke in a Disney classic? Your choices are Pinocchio, Peter Pan, Alice from Alice in Wonderland, Ariel from The Little Mermaid, the genie from Aladdin, and lastly, Roger from 101 Dalmatians. Again, which one of these characters did not smoke in a movie? Well, it's a trick question, because all of these characters smoked in a Disney movie. Pinocchio smoked cigars on Pleasure Island when he was shooting pool with Lampwick. If you remember the scene, he turned green in the face when he tried it, but he was still so driven to smoke that he continued to smoke despite that. Peter Pan smoked with the Tiger Lily's father. He's so cool he blew a smoke triangle, as you'll notice in the picture. Alice from Alice in Wonderland is an interesting one. She hung out with a caterpillar who was actually smoking a hookah pipe. Talk about things making a comeback. And while she was there, she was exposed to so much secondhand smoke as the caterpillar blew puff after puff in her face that she was actually able to inhale and blow back a smoke ring. Ariel from The Little Mermaid actually picked up a pipe at the dinner table in the prince's castle. I believe she thought it was a snarfblat, but she picked the thing up and took a big drag at the pipe at the dinner table. The genie from Aladdin smokes a couple of different circumstances. Here he is smoking as a Frenchman, where he's so cool he blows a smoke heart. And lastly, Roger from 101 Dalmatians smokes a pipe in virtually every scene he's in. And I bring that to your attention because when you talk about Disney smoking, everybody references Cruella de Vil. Oh, it's always the villains, and it looks so nasty. Well, believe it or not, Roger smokes more in 101 Dalmatians than Cruella de Vil does. He smokes when he's happy. He smokes when he's upset. The puppies are being born. He's nervous. He smokes. The puppies are born and he's happy. He smokes. He walks the dog. He smokes. He writes music. He smokes. And you'll notice his smoke is sort of a white, puffy, kind of nice-looking smoke. It's not the green, nasty smoke that came off of Cruella de Vil's cigarette. So what's the messaging here? Because if you look at these 6 characters, you'll realize none of these characters are villains. And most of them are the main characters in the movies in which they are. These are the stars of the movie smoking. And you might argue, well, Pinocchio was made in 1940. Well, that's true. It was made in 1940. But remember, when Pinocchio was made, people went to the movies once, all adults. They saw the movie, and they went home. And next week, they didn't see the same movie. But now people buy these things on DVD and Blu-ray. Kids get on a jag where they'll watch Pinocchio 3-4 weeks in a row. 7 different characters smoking Pinocchio. They don't understand it was made in 1940. They're seeing it now. And they see 7 characters smoke over and over and over again. And it sends the message that everybody smokes. It doesn't matter how old the movie is, because children aren't going back and saying, let me put this in historical perspective. By the way, the Surgeon General's report was issued in 1964, and at least 2 of the movies on here were made in the 1980s and 1990s, many years after the Surgeon General's report on the dangers of smoking, many years after the dangers of secondhand smoke were established, and yet we still had modern cartoons being made with people smoking. This is incredibly important for young kids. This is what sets the table. But your kids aren't necessarily always watching Disney movies. Here's a scene from Men in Black, where several aliens are evacuating the planet and they have to take cartons of Marlboros with them. They can't survive off of Earth without their Marlboro cigarettes. That's a blatant product placement. That's an advertisement for Marlboro built into a movie. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, Jabba the Hutt smoked hookah. Again, talk about making a comeback. Superman fought an entire scene around a Marlboro truck in the Superman movie with Christopher Reeve. Blatant product placement to get name recognition in a cartoon-based movie for youth. Raiders of the Lost Ark, here's Indiana Jones hanging out in, of all places, a hookah pipe, a hookah bar. Now again, The movie's supposed to take place in the 1930s. How many kids do you think sit and put that in historical context, especially when they're starting to hang out in hookah bars near the University of Florida, or FAU, or the University of South Florida, or Florida State University? Here's Indiana Jones' girlfriend from the exact same movie using tobacco to be tough, to show some side of her that she wouldn't be able to reveal without tobacco. This glorifies and makes tobacco seem like it's something that would improve your self-esteem. You gotta have it, or you're not going to get through the day. Some newer movies that your kids are seeing. Here's Spider-Man 3, J. Jonah Jameson smoking cigars in an office setting, which, by the way, smoking has been banned in New York when this movie takes place, and yet nobody's going to tell this guy he shouldn't smoke a cigar in the office. Or Wolverine from X-Men, or Hellboy from Hellboy 2, or the General from the last Hulk movie, or somebody smoking in the famous Batman movie, which made over $500 million in the United States alone, or Iron Man, or Avatar, which all made almost $700 million. And here we have an environmental scientist in the future on a faraway planet where who's growing tobacco on that planet? Where on Pandora are they growing tobacco? And yet here she is toking away on a cigarette, and that was seen by so many people that it creates a tremendous amount of tobacco impressions. It normalizes tobacco use. It must be okay. Somebody who's so worried about the indigent, I'm sorry, not the indigent, but the population of a faraway planet, it must be okay to smoke if she thinks it's okay. Tobacco products in movies are a form of marketing. The sheer presence of these things in the movie makes it a marketing tool. From 1950 to 1990, smoking in movies decreased as smoking in the general population decreased. And then about 1990, we started to see an increase in the amount of smoking in modern movies. By 2002, the smoking that occurred in our modern movies was just as common as the movies that had been made in the 1950s. And yet people didn't smoke in those rates in the real world. Starting about 2002, the amount of smoking depicted in movies that were for youth, such as G, PG, and PG-13 movies, exceeded the amount of smoking in R-rated movies for adults. In other words, it was popping up in the movies your kids were seeing, not the movies that were geared specifically to adults. Think about that. I saw a movie recently that took place in Las Vegas and involved a bachelor party. I would have expected tons of tobacco in that movie. But no. The movie was The Hangover. One background extra smokes a cigarette one time in the entire movie. This is a movie where you would expect adults to smoke cigars. Not there. And yet I just showed you 6 different superhero movies in the last 3 years that had smoking, almost all cigars. So why is it appearing in PG-13 movies when it's not appearing in R-rated movies? Between 1950 and 2000, the prevalence of adult smoking in the United States fell from a high of 44% to 22%. It was cut in half. Yet lead actors in movies during 2002 and 2003 smoked in 60% of the popular movies. I showed you a slide earlier where we said that kids believe adults are smoking at a level of about 64%. Interesting, huh? Lead actors are smoking in 60% of popular films. Where do you think the young children and teenagers are seeing the level of adult smokers? They're not seeing it in the real world. They're seeing it in the fictional world of movies. Female leads increased the amount of smoking from the 1960s to 1997. Think about what that means. In 1964, we had a Surgeon General's warning where we were told it was dangerous to smoke. And we saw a decline in the amount of smoking in the real world. And yet the amount of women who smoked in movies tripled between 1960 and 1997. During 1996 and 1997, there were 7 different animated movies. In every G-rated animated movie in those 2 years, one character smoked. These are hand-drawn animated characters that have no need to smoke. They're not real characters, and yet every movie had at least one character that was seen to smoke, and this is 30 years after the Surgeon General's report on how dangerous it is to use tobacco. In the fictional world of movies, nobody ever gets sick or dies. Think about that. What's the last movie you watched where somebody actually got sick from tobacco? It's very rare. There are just a handful of examples that I can cite. There was a film a few years back with Robin Williams, who was playing a stand-up comic who was running for president. And there was a character in there who had emphysema. That's the last movie I've seen where it was even referenced that it was harmful. The other thing to remember is that nobody ever ages in the movies. John Travolta smoked in Grease. That was made in 1978. When my daughter watched Grease this summer, he looked just as good as he did in 1978. Now, I've seen pictures of John Travolta recently. He doesn't look that good anymore. But here he has been smoking these same cigarettes for 30-something years, and he never gets older, and he never gets sick. So what's the implication? That tobacco's not harmful. And so the fact that many people own these movies and watch them over and over and over again increases the amount of smoking impressions and also decreases the belief that smoking is somehow harmful. And here's why it's so important. In one survey of adolescents who actually smoke, 52% of those surveyed said that it looked cool in a movie and that's why they started. There was a similar survey done about the same time that showed 34% who said the same thing. So we know that somewhere between 1/3 and 1/2 of all teenagers who smoke may be lighting up their first cigarette because they saw it in a movie and it looked so darn cool. So what are some of the solutions? Well, some groups propose that we require an R rating for any movie that shows tobacco use. That would maybe limit the amount included. That would be a financial sting because most R-rated movies make about 25% less than they would if they got a PG-13 rating. So the financial sting might make them remove those images from the movies. Other possible solutions are to have the companies certify in the end credits that they received no financial gain from the tobacco companies. And of course, if they had to certify that, they would probably get no financial gains from the tobacco companies, which would limit the amount of tobacco impressions. Another possibility would be to require strong anti-tobacco ads before any movie that shows tobacco use. Studies have shown that kids who see those type of ads before a movie have a less receptive opinion of tobacco during the movie. And finally, complete elimination of identifiable tobacco brands in the movies. In 1998, the tobacco industry promised that they would stop marketing tobacco brands in movies, what we call product placement. They essentially have stopped putting tobacco packs in the movies, but they have not stopped putting tobacco signs. So what happens is in background scenes, you will see posters for products in the background, even though you're no longer seeing the packs of cigarettes. Those are not there by accident, and I can assure you anything you see in a frame of a movie is there on purpose. And so as a result of the settlement in 1998, you won't see packs anymore, but you will still see brand names. So just to summarize what we've talked about today, children and teenagers significantly overestimate the number of adult tobacco users. In fact, they give a number that's threefold higher than it truly is. The quantity of tobacco ads at retail outlets contributes to this problem while targeting youth. And the quantity of smoking images in youth-oriented movies also contributes to this problem while also making smoking seem cool or sexy. So the big problem that we're facing is that children and teenagers really believe that more people use tobacco than really do. And until we correct that perception, we're going to lose generation after generation of young people who are basically choosing to do something that they perceive as being normal. Thank you for your attention on this important topic. For more information on this and other tobacco topics, please contact your tobacco control staff in your local county or contact the Florida Department of Health.